Hello and welcome back to the Squash Bagel. Today I'll be giving my review of the Dunlop Sonic Core Revelation 125. So I've been using this for about 7 weeks. I'm going to talk about some of the racket information, the pros, the cons, who this racket might be for, and then discuss why this racket was not for me. As always, the Dunlop Sonic Core Revelation 125 can be found at SQUASHATEERS.co.za, but more on that a bit later. Timestamps for the video can be found below. Without wasting any more time, let's get straight into it. The Dunlop Sonic Core Revelation 125, and it is a mouthful, is one of the two revelations that can be found in the Dunlop Sonic Core lineup. There's a 125 gram version, which is this one, and there's a 135 gram version, which is used by, I would like to pronounce his name correctly, but I won't, Malaysian #1, which is Yao Ion Nigi, something like that. So that racket is slightly different due to the fact that it comes in 135 grams, as well as the fact that it is strung in sort of a fan pattern that you normally see on the head rackets. And then you get this one, which is used by Noor El Tayeb, which is Ali Farag's wife, as well as Tina Gillis from Belgium. This comes in at a frame weight of about 125 grams, and what I measured on, I've got two of these, about 151 and 152 grams. So basically, obviously there's a tolerance which will ensure that you will not get any rackets which are exactly the same. You might not, but that weighed in at about 151, 150 grams basically on my scale, with everything inside. So being the strings, so I've got the Technifiber 305 1.1 millimeter strings on this, and I've just got a normal Caracal Super PU grip on here. So altogether that comes in about 151 grams. So with respect to rackets, I think I had mentioned in the previous video, you get head heavy rackets, evenly distributed rackets between the head as well as the handle. You get head light rackets, and you actually get some of these which are considered extra head light. And that is quite evident if you ever actually get a chance to hit with one of these. It is very, very light in the head. Most of the weight distributed obviously into the handle, and that has obviously a few pros and cons that we'll get into. With respect to the overall build of the racket, I found that it came with minimal to no vibration, even without the signature dampener that comes with the racket. And last but not least, it has a 500 square centimeter head size, which will give you an ample amount of power, which also allow the racket to be a little bit more forgiving compared to your smaller head size. It has a 500 square centimeter head size, which is going to deliver a lot of power. That is one of the things we'll obviously talk about. It is obviously very forgiving and allows you to play the ball really well in all sort of scenarios. So with respect to the pros, one, as I did mention, the 500 square centimeter head size, as well as the fact that it is extra headlight, really delivers a lot of power, like a lot of power. And that's obviously quite great, specifically for the fact this combination will be great for players which obviously have a very short swing, but that is one of the pros. I did not find any sort of scenario where I was lacking the opportunity to generate a lot of power, even from a very short swing, very close to myself, or if I was under pressure. I think that's something that can be seen obviously in the way Noor El Tayeb plays, as well as Tina Gillis. They obviously like to hit the ball quite hard. They're very good at their power plays, but they also like to take the ball short. It's actually quite alarming to think about how much power is delivered with this type of racket, even though it is so light. It's actually quite scary to think about what the 135 version would actually be able to deliver, which is obviously used by Malaysian #1, as I did mention. Due to the fact that it's extra headlight and also just a very light racket at 125 grams, the frame weight, it is very maneuverable. It being very maneuverable, I found that there was very little, in fact probably no forearm fatigue. Even if I had to play a 5-setter like the last video or the last match that I have linked in the video, forearm fatigue was not something that I obviously wrestled with, and it is quite nice to actually have something that's light. It allows you to still deliver the same amount of power from game 1 to game 5. And on the theme of maneuverability, the extra headlight characteristic of the racket is great for players that would like to utilize a hold and a bit of a flick to add a bit of deception to the game. So I found that this racket definitely enabled you to do that, and also probably encourage you to do that, or encourage me to do that a lot more. This is something that's probably not really spoken about sometimes, but I'd like to mention the fact that it came with great factory strings. So if you haven't checked my previous video, I did speak about the strings that it comes with, which are the Dunlop Pro Iconic AF Ali Farag. They are 1.18 millimeter strings, and I actually did rate the string quite highly. It's actually really, really nice that a racket comes with a really good set of strings. I think more manufacturers are moving towards that model. I know Dunlop's doing that. They are pairing their new range of rackets with great strings, because it's quite a shame if people have to sort of buy a racket only to change and cut the strings that it comes out with. Dunlop, at least I've seen, they're putting a lot of effort into making sure that their frames come with really good quality rackets. And I think that is greatly appreciated by people that believe in the brand and also use their rackets. One of the areas where I felt that this racket excelled in is also in the front court play. So as I said, being very maneuverable, being able to pluck the ball out of the air and go for your volleys. I don't think that you'll feel shy to do that with this type of racket. It's just a really great weapon for people that like to go short. I found that drops and volleys were quite enjoyable. Just because it's extra headlight, I did find myself sort of adapting my swing to play a drop shot, because obviously the fact that the racket is extra headlight, I might have to bring the racket back a little bit more in order to play the same type of drop shop that I would be able to play maybe with a heavy racket or evenly balanced racket. But after you figure that out, I think you really start to enjoy going short with this racket. With respect to the design, I think you really do get ugly rackets and you really get rackets like this. I have customized it with the Technifiber 305 green strings just because I play with them. So on any racket at the moment, I will play with them. But I think the factory default strings that it came with, the Dunlop Iconic Pro F, as well as a black grip, if you can get a all black sort of configuration or setup or color scheme, that looks really cool. It actually even prevented me from trying to change the grip very early on because it just really looked cool as soon as they arrived. All black racket case, all black rackets. It really is something that sort of catches a lot of attention. In fact, that is something when I took them out for the first time, a lot of people came past just to come and see what this racket was. The last pro, I think, is the technology. So Dunlop has really done a good job with the Sonic Core technology. If you haven't obviously heard about it, it's something that you can obviously read up about, where they've obviously injected material to try to reduce vibration, and it really has reduced the vibration. I think previously people used to either restring it at a lower tension or sometimes a higher tension and just either hope that they would get rid of the vibration or would actually live with it. And maybe actually that's why these dampeners were actually very useful. I've never actually used them. I think I have tried them, yes, as soon as the racket arrives, but afterwards I normally do take them off because also if it has to pop off your racket, obviously you will lose the point. But apart from that, I don't find the need to actually use any of these. So I actually have a couple of them sticking around in my squash bag. So it's quite cool that their new technology definitely has reduced vibration. That is something that's quite nice. Can annoy players, can put players off, and some people have obviously moved away from Dunlop in the past because their rackets at a previous stage used to vibrate a lot. Okay, let's speak about the cons, and they're not many, but I think the extra headlight rackets aren't suited for everyone. I will probably go into the specifics in the next section where I will speak about who the racket is for, but I did find that this racket can sort of lead to and encourage a style which might be considered hacking. With respect to consistency, which is obviously being able to play the same shot over and over again, I find that the lack of weight behind the racket requires a very conscious and consistent swing in order to get to the accuracy that you desire, so that would come more from you than the racket doing the work itself. That's a benefit of obviously using some heavy rackets, is that once you get a basic swing, the racket does most of the work for you. This could be a good thing. It might encourage you to obviously improve that aspect. Using extra headlight racket might show you sort of the error in your ways, how inconsistent your swing may be. It definitely showed me how inconsistent my swing was, but it might encourage you to actually figure that out and sort that out for your game, and that will obviously be something that would suit you and would benefit you in the long run. But with that being said, you must realize that most of us who love the game as well as watch the game and watch these type of videos are not professionals, so we might not have the ability, time, or the facilities in order to make sure that we can get a consistent swing. Just so that we can use a racket, most players will probably opt for a racket that does most of the work for them, so that they have a lot less to worry about in that aspect and focus on other parts of their game. With that being said, there needs to be a huge focus on racket preparation when using this racket, just to make sure that your swing is very consistent and you do not pick bad habits, which is something that I felt that I started to do. With respect to drives, especially in the mid-court as well as the front court area, I found that it was great, but unfortunately out of the back corners, and that can obviously be helped and improved upon with good preparation, a lot of footwork, and obviously making sure that your swing is quite good. But I did find that there was a bit of a struggle, which I would have to counteract by being a little bit more conscious, would require a little bit more effort on my part to make sure that my drives were consistent compared to some other rackets that I have used in the past. So this is a message for my South African audience. Are you sick and tired of trying to find your favorite racket, only to be let down by either a high price or lack of stock? Well, SQUASHATEERS.co.za is the solution for you. They have a wide range of squash rackets, squash gear, strings, and whatever it is that you're looking for, all on their online website. I think two of the sweeteners that I can mention is the fact that one, they offer these products at very competitive prices, and two, you get free shipping for orders at 3,000 Rand or more. So click the link that I've left down in the description below to visit their site and find some awesome deals. And when you check out, let them know that the Squash Bagel sent you there. Happy shopping. So who is this racket for? I think the racket's for players which are looking to inject a little bit more pace by stepping up on the tee, taking in more volleys, taking the ball in a little bit more early, as well as obviously taking the ball in a very short, and looking for places where you can dominate, especially in the front court areas of the court. I found that it being extra headlight did encourage you to be a little bit more creative. So if you're looking for a little bit extra, a little bit more creativity in your game, a little bit more attack in your game, I found that this could be the racket and it could be suited for a couple of players. So I did find myself playing more of an attacking style of squash, which is great obviously for some situations. But the thing is that when you start playing obviously a little bit more mature players, a little bit better players, you cannot attack the entire time. And that's where I did mention obviously with respect to cons, if you're being put into the back corners where your attack is limited itself, the racket obviously did not perform. I think it's also basically suited for players who struggle to generate power. As I did mention, it's got a huge head size, 500 square centimeters. It is also extra headlight, so for people which don't have a really good swing, I wouldn't say don't have a good swing mechanic, or let's say, I won't say that people shouldn't work on their swing per se, but if people are struggling with that, either due to some sort of injuries or physical limitations, or just due to a lack of weight and strength that they can get behind a ball, this might be a racket suited for some of those players. I think it's also probably a racket for players with a smaller build and a smaller frame. Not to say anything against these players, but obviously if you have seen Noor Al-Tayeb as well as Tina, they're sort of in the small category of around, I think Tina is around 62 kgs, if I'm not mistaken. That's what I saw on the PSA website. Noor Al-Tayeb is around 53 kgs. So in order for them to generate a lot of power, in order for them not to have sort of the fatigue and to play the type of squash that they want to and need to play, maybe an extra headlight racket is obviously suited for them since they are of a smaller build and of a smaller frame. So let's talk about why this racket was not for me. So I moved from the Technifiber Carboflex X-Top 130 gram. Went to that one because I was looking for a little bit more consistency in my drives. After working on that, I thought I had that sorted out and I was looking for maybe a little bit more maneuverability as well as the ability to try take the ball a bit earlier. This racket did help in that aspect, but the thing is that the racket helped in one aspect, but the thing that I need to probably work on is actually more of my footwork in order to enable me to actually use this racket, let's say, or any racket, to take the ball a bit earlier. I also found that because the racket is extra headlight, it allowed me the ability to drop my racket because I was obviously able to pick it up a bit later and maybe not suffer as many consequences in that sense, but pick the racket up later. So my racket prep obviously went to shreds, and I could get away with it obviously because of the fact that it is an extra headlight racket. So if it is something that you sort of struggle with, there is one sort of train of thought to say maybe look for a racket like this, but on the other hand, it's probably something that you want to dial down and fix before actually moving to a racket like this, or need to fix before even getting something like this and keeping maybe the racket that you do have. So the transition to this racket definitely helped that aspect of my game, but I found myself less consistent with my shots, especially when I had to play opponents where we have to basically extend the rallies and make them a bit longer in order for me to get obviously into winning positions before I go for the short shots and those attacking shots that I was looking for. As mentioned before, I think there's a lot of effort that needs to be consciously put into control the weight of a shot compared to some of your heavier rackets and maybe your heavy rackets. I found I was probably lacking that aspect of the game, finding the perfect weight of shot in order to make sure that the ball dies to the back. I either found myself overhitting it where the length was overhit and hits the back wall, or sort of hit short where the ball was really dying. So sometimes that was great for a kill shot, but the thing is that if I didn't pull off the kill shot, I was obviously in deep water because I've put my opponent sort of in the mid-court area where they've got opportunity and as well as angles to sort of attack me. Although I benefited from some of the pros, I also suffered from some of the cons. And unfortunately, the pros did not outweigh the cons, especially considering some of the players that I was playing against in some of the tournaments over the last 7 weeks. And I think you can't hack your way to victory against really, really good opponents. It might obviously work against some people which aren't as good. It might actually work for, as a surprise to some players which have never seen you play before. I think that happened obviously in a couple of situations as well, but the thing is that eventually people get used to that and they can implement strategies against you if they know that you are playing that type of squash. So it's not that the racket's bad at all, and don't get me wrong, I'm just saying that it's not for me. If you look at players, as I mentioned, like Noor Al-Tayeb and Tina Gillis, them being of a smaller frame, they're looking for power in their game, and this racket does deliver that for them. But I don't think power is something that I'm going to struggle with at 86 kilograms compared to their frames and weight. So I think probably it just definitely gave me a little bit of more creativity and another aspect and component to my game, which I did like, and I have learned from that how I can probably still mimic that using other types of rackets, and I have been now experimenting with new rackets to try to see what I'm going to move on to. It's not an excuse for me to actually use an extra headlight racket at 86 kgs in order to try to get more power. I think if I cannot get power, I think there's obviously a bigger fundamental issue that I'll need to resolve. But I do find that I am not struggling with that. Maybe just being able to let my arm as well as forearm go and shoulders go, or just swing at balls for the last 7 weeks has enabled me to see that aspect, see how fast a racket can move through the air and look for that again. And I can obviously take those lessons learned with this racket and obviously apply it to another racket per se, but obviously realizing that I can still generate power and speed by working on other aspects of my squash, which is obviously my footwork, my movement, allowing myself to be in the right position in order to hit the ball well. All in all, I think at the end of the day, it helps me and takes me one step closer to finding my ideal racket. And I think that will be something with a little bit of weight to keep my shots a bit more consistent, something that is sort of very maneuverable in the air, which allows me the option of opportunity to take the balls in short and actually play my volleys. And thinking about that, specifically the fact that I obviously lacked a bit of consistency and tried to now find that, I'm trying to find that, it's probably maybe pushing me even towards the traditional frames of rackets, something with a round shape head. So with that being said, who can guess what my next racket will be? Stay tuned to find out. As always, take care. Cheers. Bye.